Welcome to this video podcast. In collaboration with the Royal Swedish Academy of War Sciences and its project SVAR, we explore Sweden's path into NATO and the EU, as well as issues of deterrence and resilience. How are these affected by NATO membership, developments in the USA, and the war that Russia initiated against Ukraine in 2014, which escalated into a full-scale invasion in 2022? In recent years, questions about nuclear deterrence have increased, especially after Donald Trump's second presidential term in the USA. What can we really expect from US support in an existential crisis? Is it enough for Europe to double its defense spending, or will the demands for European efforts increase before the USA provides the necessary backstop on conventional and nuclear levels? Against this background, a discussion about Europe has blossomed in Europe. With us today is Björn Körlof, Chair of Section 5 of the Academy, known for his eminent knowledge about civil defense, having served in several Director General functions in that domain and also been an MP. The conversation begins on the basis of an AI-generated document collecting sources updating a blog post written by Björn, which in turn is a continuation of the analysis published in the midterm report of the project and finalized at the beginning of this year. Björn will then provide a synthesis that we hope can give opinion leaders and decision-makers in Sweden a basis for taking a stand on the issue.
So, I'm so happy, Björn, that you have agreed to do this podcast with me as a follow-up to our work in the project in the Academy on civil defense in NATO. This is the third podcast in a row, which we are publishing as a follow-up also to the midterm report we did from the project. So the midterm report contained many different chapters, of which this one was a very important one. Earlier today, we recorded a podcast with General Neretniks on the military situation and the way ahead for that. And of course, this is a very important complement. We've also had a podcast with Naval Captain Lars-Erik Lundin on the nuclear weapon issues and the issue of a potential French nuclear umbrella. So what I have in front of us during this podcast is a text, which is basically an AI elaboration and check for sources to underpin and to update your chapter, a chapter in the midterm report on civil defense, and also a blog post, which you are going to publish soon on the Academy website in Swedish, on the way ahead. And of course, I have already presented you in the initial part of this podcast, so I don't do it here, but I can say one thing about you, and that is that it seems that people are really listening to you, not only publicly, but also in the government. There are several reports that have come out, Defense Commission, and also a report from the review of the functioning of civil defense in Sweden, the official review, which has taken up quite a number of your proposals. So that's good, and shows that the Academy has some useful role in this, having pushed for civil defense now for more than 10 years in the studies and project undertaken by the Academy. So I propose that we simply go through this update to the situation as it looks from the position of AI, looking for sources in different countries and the discussion about civil defense in different countries, and see how we can move forward in Sweden in the most practical way and what scenarios we have. We will look at both successful scenarios and those which are more challenging and require additional efforts. Let me start by just referring to the requirements set by NATO, the 7 requirements set by NATO for civil defense, which you have also referred to in your report. And you have addressed legislative gaps, competences, challenges, leadership structures, and so on. So how would you and let us tell the viewers of this podcast immediately if the text is too long to read here, that would then be an occasion to stop, pause the screen to read because we are not waiting for reading. People can do that afterwards, but we just go through orally the main gist of the topic, the issues here. So maybe you want to say something first about what it means for us to be a member of NATO in terms of civil defense.
Well, one of the main things that I have focused on in my review and my text is that the basic laws of Sweden and also laws pertaining to the basic laws are not fully equipped to handle the security policy situation that we are in now, because our basic laws are fundamentally built for or written for another situation. One of those other situations is that they were written for a Sweden that was non-aligned and had the intention to stay neutral in case of war between the great powers. And that is not the situation now. We are a member of an alliance, and we are focusing on all the different things that can happen in the northern part of Europe, militarily and in other ways. Another thing that is not thought of in our legislation is that we have to focus on the hybrid side of aggression, and that is something that is not taken care of in our laws, really. So we have to take care of those threats and those aggressions within the law system that is built for peace, fundamentally for peace. And that is something that has to be thought of, and the laws have to be changed, in my view, to take care of those threats and those aggressions. And that is something that is not just for Sweden to think about. It's something that the whole of Europe and NATO and other countries as well have to think about, how to handle those forms of aggression against the society. And those have to be handled not only by the civil society, they have to be handled by the military side as well, of course. So those are the two main things that I'm focusing on when it comes to the legal part of it.
Okay. So what would that mean in terms of strategic requirements?
Well, as far as I can understand, the structure that we have built up from 2022 is that we have a sort of structure that takes care of the responsibilities, but this structure is not really built for building up the different kinds of what I would say the different kinds of capabilities that we have to in order to take care of all the things that have to do with aggression, both military aggression and hybrid aggression. And the societal functions are not really built to take care of those kinds of aggressions. So important parts of what NATO requires from us is something that we are not really built up for today, but we have to do it, and this requires both the more how should I say, more specific responsibilities from different kinds of the society, but also, of course, fundamental planning directions in order to take care of those functions in important parts of the civil society. And as far as it goes for the civilian protection, we have just started to take care of how to do this. And we are now looking into shelters, how to, in fact, try to move people from areas that can be attacked. And all those plans that we had during the Cold War, they are now sort of taking out of the shelves and looked upon again. How can this be done, and how can it be done in a society which is in many ways it looks different from many points of view. For example, just to take one example, half of the Swedish population is now living in the great big cities areas of Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö. It's half the population that lives in those areas, and that was not the case during the Cold War. So it's one of the main things that we have to look into when it comes to the problem of taking care of protecting the civilian population.
Are you planning evacuation as well, evacuation systems, or?
I know that they have started planning those activities, but I'm not sure whether it's done properly or if it's done in specific terms, because many ideas that have to do with evacuating people from the big cities is problems that are overwhelmingly big and have to be perhaps reconsidered. Is it possible to evacuate people from the big cities, really? So I know that there are a lot of pondering about that.
Yeah. And what about this disconnect between money and competencies? I mean, the money, I suppose, the possibility to raise money is very much on the level of the state, but many of the competences rest with the local and regional authorities. How is that going to be dealt with?
In my view, one of the main things to start with is competence among a lot of people that haven't that competence now, because during almost 30 years of non-existent planning, we haven't built a competence among local and regional level peoples how to plan and how to implement the different things that comes from the government and from the parliament. So the planning system, how it works and how it should be implemented, is something that requires good competence among a lot of different parts of the civilian society. And those competencies, they aren't there now. So just sparsely among the local and the regional levels.
And but there is another interpretation of the concept of competence in the EU context. Competence means legal competence, the right to do things. I mean, it's also a big problem, isn't it?
Yes. When I'm in contact with regional and local levels in our public society, I find that they very often they stumble upon the legal system that we have. How can it be interpreted? How can I use it? Can it be used now, or do I have to wait in order to get more information how to do it? So there is a sort of a stumbling situation which we have to overcome very, very quickly, and not just wait to see what happens around us. We have to implement the rules, and it must be implemented by people who know how to use them.
Ja. Nu måste jag kolla bara en grej som är vår inspelning här. Ja. Det funkar. Kör vidare. All right, let's revert. I am worried about when I hear people talking about competence in a legal context, because there seems to be a disconnect between the money and the right to direct. People on the legal and local and regional levels, I suppose, very much focus on their right to decide on things. How do you override that? I mean, do you need a wartime situation for that? Is that what you meant when you spoke about this blurred border between peace and war?
It's in the budget that was accepted by the Parliament in December. It was the first time since almost 30 years that we got a budget for the civilian defense, a comprehensive budget. That has not been the case for a long period of time. And now we have a civilian budget, and the next step is to see that different parts of that budget goes to, as far as I can understand it, the most important areas of the civilian part of total defense. For example, protection of the population, how to manage the energy system, how to manage the transportation system, how to manage the financial system, for example. We have 10 such important areas in the civilian defense, and now the budget goes mainly to those 10 areas, important areas. But then we have, they are on a national level, and then we have the geographical parts of Sweden, that that money has to go to the geographical parts as well, along the lines of those 10 most important civilian areas, and then further down to the lower regional level and to the local level. But this hasn't been done so far. So when you talk to an official in the local part of Sweden and ask him or her, do you know how much money you will get for the civilian defense and what you can use it for? The answer is no, because they don't know. Simply, it hasn't been distributed out into the specific parts of the system. It's still up on the national level, and this means that they cannot plan on the local and regional levels so far, and that's of course is a mishap in the system. It has to be implemented. The budget system has to start functioning in order to get money into the right parts of the system.
And when NATO looks at this from the point of view of its seven baseline requirements, is there a way for NATO to intervene to audit this? To come to say to Sweden, well, listen, you have to shape up here, you have to do it quicker, or is there a system for that?
No, as far as I can understand, there is not a system for that. NATO will probably, when they look into our system, they will probably say that some of the NATO strategic requirements you're starting to come up to snuff. about that. But many of those strategic requirements are not fulfilled within our system so far. But we are starting to come up to their requirements. But it will take some time, among other things, because we have so few people who know how to handle the system.
Yeah. And what about the overall scope of the discussion? Because I suppose that even if there has now become, we got a decision on the budget for civil defense. Still, the governmental budget, which is relevant for this kind of challenges, is much, much bigger. I don't know how many times bigger. If you look at infrastructure and roads and hospitals and all these systems that have to function in case of war and protect the population, how much bigger is the overall budget that is relevant for civil defense in your view?
A very good question. Very good question. Because you're quite right when you say that, for example, in the infrastructure, when it comes to railways, roads, harbors, airfields, things like that, they have to be looked upon from a military point of view and from a civilian defense point of view, as well as from ordinary peacetime requirements. But exactly how the division between requirements from total defense, when you look upon it from a total defense point of view, and when you look upon it from ordinary peacetime point of view, that is very difficult to tell. But the question that you asked, it has come up, and everyone knows that some of the money going to railroads and roads and other infrastructure processes are certainly very important from a total defense point of view, of course.
So, because I've understood that one of your key targets in your writings and in your public presentations has been to look at the leadership issue, who will actually decide, who will direct, who will govern, so to say, who will make people enthusiastic and really focus on the overall challenge that we are meeting. There you have struggled, I suppose, with the question whether it should be on the level of the sectoral governmental bodies, or whether it is actually a matter for the cabinet of ministers of Sweden. What do you think? Where are you now on that? Because I know there have been different views about it also in the Defense Commission, where we heard that some people say, no, this is so much that it's actually only the government itself, the political body, the ministers, who can do this coordination. But now we have a new body for civil defense with a capable former military flag officer in the lead, Mikael Frisell. What will be his role, you think?
That's also a very good question, because this body, Myndigheten för samhällsskydd och beredskap, this emergency authority, have to be reshaped, and I think the government has started to reshape this authority. And one of the main things that divided the Parliamentary Commission on Defense, they were divided on how to look upon this authority. Should it be an authority that sort of was a comprehensive body for taking care of the planning of the whole civilian part of total defense? Or should it just take care of some parts of it? So that was one of the main things. And I think that the government need an authority that has a comprehensive role of looking upon all the different parts of the civilian total defense, those 10 main sectors, how should they be looked upon in a comprehensive way, and give suggestions or to the government how to look upon it. Because otherwise the government must have in it all those competencies. And they are today splintered between different parts of the government. So I think it must be a more comprehensive view of this civilian part of the total defense, and this must be taken care of in this authority. That's my way of looking upon it.
It is interesting because in the projects we had in the academy before, the SES project, for instance, we know that the president of the academy at that point, the former commander-in-chief, Sverige Göransson, proposed that we should introduce a concept of societal defense, so to say, to really try to do the whole budget and try to create an overall system to manage the challenges that we are facing. But this is the tall order to come to such a decision, of course. So I don't know. Clearly, this is an evolving discussion, and what we have seen, you and I, when we have been to the Sälen conferences now several years in a row, is that we hear that the Minister for Civil Defense, he asks people to do things even if they do not yet have the money or just to do everything which is possible to move on, and that's again a tall order.
I will add something about the problem of responsible leadership within the civilian part of total defense, and that is the higher regional level, which I think is very important when it comes to NATO operations, cooperation between the civilian part and the military part of the society, and taking care of the lower and local parts of the civilian society. I think that the higher regional level will be one of the main points of leading different kinds of actions or different kinds of taking care of different parts of the civilian society in case of an attack, or in case of really most important thing, the host nation support system. It must be handled on a higher regional level in order to you must be sure that you have the right resources all the time in order to come up to the requirements if that should happen.
And what about the coordination also both between the military part of the defense system, and then also I know that you have highlighted the need to be able to work closely with Norway, for instance, that we get a congruent system. Can you say a word about that? Because I know you're going to have a conference up in north of Sweden soon.
Yes.
With authorities there.
Yes, we have started with a conference in the southern part of Sweden, and we started looking upon how they could foresee cooperation between them, Denmark, and perhaps Germany and Poland and the Baltic states, when if such a situation or scenario would come where host nation support would be one of the main tasks to handle. And they knew that was one of their main things to look into and to come into a cooperation system with the other countries. But they hadn't got that far yet. I know that in the northern part of Sweden they have come further in this kind of thinking. So the northern regional chief there, she is very keen on cooperation between Finland, Sweden, and Norway in the northern part of the Scandinavian peninsula. Yeah. So we'll go up there and look upon how that is done up there.
Yeah. So that's great. Now, if we look at, if you get your wish, so to say, that we really have a full implementation of your recommendation, what would that mean in terms of timing? How quickly could we meet an aggression, so to say? Is that something for the 1930s, or what would happen if something happened already towards the end of this decade?
One of the things that I have written about is that during the Cold War period, when we had this system of higher regional command, both on the military and the civilian side of the total defense, one of the main things was that they had to look into a scenario, a wartime situation, which was very well written, and they had to come up with solutions on such a wartime situation together. The military commander and the civilian commander had to come up with different kinds of solutions together, and they had to write it down, and they had to train and get their people in the different staffs to handle this kind of an attack, an aggression within different branches of their responsibilities. And when they trained those situations, there very often came up problems, there came up situations that were not possible to handle, and so they thought, we have to change our views, we have to implement a new kind of look upon this, and then they started again. So this was a system that was working all the time in order to handle a real wartime situation together between the military and the civilian part of the society on a higher regional level. And that was a very, very good system as far as I can understand, because it was trained and it was tested continually and was written down in, of course, it was secret documents, but it was written down all the time and tested.
Yeah, because we are, maybe I could add a word here that we are working with scenarios in the project as a whole, trying to understand what kind of situation we would have to prepare ourselves for. And there is a wide range of possible scenarios, all the way from full-scale early support from our allies in NATO to less warning time, less transatlantic engagement, possibly a lot of hybrid warfare which undercuts our preparation. So it's clearly it's more than a question of civil defense. There is a context which we also have to understand here, which is very, very, very difficult. So there are, of course, less ambitious scenarios here that, okay, you don't get everything you ask for, but at least you would then want to have the legal framework in order. How quickly could that happen?
When it comes to our basic laws, we know that would take some time, many years. But some of the laws that are affecting the structure, the responsibility structure of the civilian defense, I think that some of those laws could in fact be changed and starting to be implemented in just half a year or a year.
Okay.
So it has to be some sort of what I think is what you sometimes call a crash program, legal crash program, in order to get the system start working within a good legal framework. Because it's not a good legal framework today because many people don't know how to handle it.
Yeah. I think people should listen to you here, because we should say possibly that you have not only been Director General of at least 3 different agencies, I think, but you have also been a Member of Parliament, so you know a little bit about things are being done in the legislative context. So there we have a second scenario, which is not ideal, of course, but at least we would have something. The third problem even worse, of course, would then be if we. I know I listened to the Polish vice defense minister day before yesterday. He was very optimistic that if we get up to 3.5% of on defense of the GDP on defense, we will manage Russian aggression, and don't worry about it. We will withstand Russian aggression. But still, if you haven't done your homework on the civil defense side, then you're still in trouble, I suppose.
Yes, you can pour money into the system, of course, but if you don't have gone through a real planning how the money should be used in order to get higher levels of proficiency and effect, it's not good to just pour money over the system. You must have a planning system which comes up with what it should be used for. Should it be used to get better infrastructure, or should we have more storage of things, more education and training of people, or what should we do? And that is lacking today.
Yeah, I was struck by the answer from Sakur, the military head of NATO, in the Congress the other day, when he was asked about money. And so I said, well, it's fine to have money, but you also need the stuff. He said, we need and the same thing was for, and that goes for the defense industry, of course, but we also had the same problem during the pandemic, that we didn't have the things that we even had the money, we didn't have the stuff, so to say.
Yes, you can, of course, produce hundreds of tanks for the military, but if you don't have the people to run them, it's just metal. And it's the same on all levels of total defense. If you have many things but not competent people, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. And then the fourth catastrophic scenario is, which would basically mean that people would become refugees, I suppose, is if you don't have any real allocation of resources, no real legal framework, no real organization, no exercises ahead, and so on. Then we are in big problems. So I suppose that we are now very keen to know what will happen under Trump too. As we speak, there is turmoil, enormous market shifts based upon leaks. Either Trump will halt tariffs or go on with slap even double tariffs on China and so on. So we are likely to come into a very difficult situation, a potential recession at least, which also can make this whole discussion even more traumatic, I suppose, in terms of...
Yes. I think that one of the discussions that we have had in the Academy is that we sort of start where we are, trying to get better cooperation and better assistance between the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries. Yeah. They are close to us. We know the problems they have. They know ours, and the distances are not so far. Some of us speak the same languages, and we can always manage with English. So if you start with Scandinavia, Finland, and the Baltic states, and perhaps Poland and Germany, we will probably have a strong cohesive system that can really start working.
Yeah. So what we see on the screen now is sort of a summary of some of the points that you have made. Maybe we should highlight as an additional issue is the question of public-private partnerships, which is a very, very critical thing to get things produced and transported, logistic, all of that will depend on an efficient functioning and very, very motivated private sector, of course.
Yes.
There we have a lot to learn from Ukraine, as being said here. But
Yes, and I think Finland has a lot to learn us about the cooperation between the public and the private sector, because they have a long tradition on that.
And you have been visiting them, I think, already in the previous project to
Yes,
learn.
we will. Yes.
Yeah, so that's great. And of course, they have a real war background experience from 3 traumatic wars during the last century. So that is already something a little bit different from our own experience in our country. But I wanted to finish by noting that in your portfolios, your responsibility in our project is not just civil defense; it is resilience in a general sense. And one study that one of your colleagues, Lars-Erik Lundin, has made is also looking at about flow security, security of supply in Sweden, where there has been a huge number of studies made by the government. Already collecting all that material has been a very important. Have you any feeling how that is moving forward on the flow security, the supply security?
Yes, it's moving slowly forward because some of the investigations, parliamentary investigations, and other have not been taken decisions on from the government point of view. So we are waiting for one of the more important of those investigations coming delivered in May, I think.
Yeah.
And that is an important part of the structure, and start letting it go to work.
Yeah.
One point I would like to make in the end is that of psychological defense.
Yeah.
Because we are under attack all the time from Russia with different kinds of subversive actions, trying to undermine the trustworthiness of government institutions and the media, and so splintering ideas among the people and so far. And those kinds of hybrid warfare on the mental side of the warfare, we don't really know how to handle it, because it's Sweden and most Western societies. They are open societies, and we rely upon truthfulness of information and so forth. And I think we'll have to come up with more substantial ways of dealing with propaganda and the Russian narrative, and sometimes outright lies, and how to do that in a way that don't undermine our system of free opinion and so forth. That is a crucial question.
Yeah, and you have headed up that work in Sweden before, I suppose, that you have seen the frustration that we have, that this is going in with social media now, including artificial intelligence, which makes it easier to fool people and make all kinds of intrusion into their private life, and make people feel threatened, and also less including support to proxies in promoting populism, and one should perhaps mention that you have yourself spent quite a lot of time to investigate the issue of truth and lies, so to say. The lie is now increasingly used even by the most respected powers in the world. Lies are being instrumentalized in order to be a tool in not only propaganda but actually in warfare.
Yes.
Maybe we should stop by mentioning that you also have the former head of the Swedish criminal police has worked on the problem of organized crime and mobilization of organized crime actors as proxies, so that might even spill over into actual aggression against Swedish official personalities, people who are having key functions in society. You would have thought that organized crime would be sort of a war between organized crime gangs, retribution and revenge and so on. But we can also see already in Germany that heads of major companies are threatened by organized crime and so on. So we have to prepare for that as well, which is very difficult. And that also links up to the fact that this is not just an east-west issue, but also north-south, that we have many issues about our relationship to the Middle East and Africa that we have to work on. So in the end, unless you want to say something about this.
Well, not so much. There are, as far as I can understand from different reports, there are some signs of organized crime being used by big powers. And those signs are, of course, very, very serious. Because if organized crime is sort of coordinated from an aggressor's point of view, it's very dangerous, of course, because organized crime sort of poisons different parts of the society, the business world, the financial world, the social security systems. So it's undermining important pillars of how we build our society. So this is something that really has to be looked upon, how to stop organized crime if it is used as a tool from an aggressor.
Yeah, and corruption is involved there, of course.
Yes.
So now I have a final screen here summarizing the most urgent priorities that the AI investigation took out from your report and also from other sources. And can mention that we have a large number of sources that we have looked into from different countries, including Finland and other countries, about civil defense. So it's a topic which is not at all limited to Sweden. We are building upon experiences from Ukraine, which has done a fantastic job in this domain. And of course, we have also in Sweden prepared during the Second World War, scaled up our work considerably. So there is some experience to build upon, but it requires a lot of efforts indeed. Do you have any final words for the viewers, listeners?
Yes. Two final words. One, both of them are from the Latin word. The first one is nil desperandum. Don't mistrust. Work on. The other one is from Cicero. He said, when the war goes on, the laws is silent.
Yeah.
But this is very often misunderstood, because he didn't mean that there were not laws in times of war. Instead, he meant that we have to use other laws in order to handle the war. And I think that is a very good idea.
Yeah. So what do you think we should do in our project further in this domain?
I think we should give some suggestions to the government and the political part of life, the parliamentarians and the parliamentarians and the government, how this should be done. What can you do in order to hasten the building up of the civilian defense?
Yeah. And in fact, you have quite a sizable number of people in the academy both in your own department, which you are heading, Department 5, but there are also many people in other parts. We have around 200 people who are not military in the academy. So we are trying to benefit from their advice, of course. So with this final note, Björn, thank you very much for doing this. And we'll finish the podcast now.